Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar, 5 Keys to Managing Performance of Oracle Forms and Oracle eBusiness Suite. I'm Frank Days. I'll be your host and one of the presenters today, along with Mia Urman, CEO of Oraplayer. Before we get started today, I wanted to take a few moments and talk about the agenda. At the beginning of the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about the background behind some of the challenges facing people trying to monitor the performance of Oracle Forms and Oracle eBusiness Suite applications. Then we'll talk a little bit about the 5 keys to managing performance in this Oracle environments. And then we'll dive into some solutions to the problem. And finally, we'll close it with a question and answer period. Just some basic housekeeping items for the presentation. We do value your time today. We're going to try to keep the presentation to around 30 minutes so you can have some time to go back and get on with things in your daily life. If you have questions, do feel free to take a moment and pop them into the chat window on the GoToWebinar screen. What we'll try to do is periodically during the presentation and at the end answer any questions that you might have about anything we talk about today. And finally, we are recording this. We also will have the slides available. The best place to find them, we'll post the video on YouTube, and we'll also post the slides on SlideShare. And you can find the link to those on the homepage of Correlsense.com. First of all, I just wanted to introduce the speakers. Again, my name is Frank Days. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Correlsense, and I'll be your host in talking through some of the slides today. And along with me today is our guest speaker, Mia Urman, the CEO of Oraplayer. Mia is an expert in the Oracle and Oracle Forms field, having spent 7 years at Oracle as a product manager and a senior support analyst. Also has over 13 years supporting and training and consulting in the Oracle tools area. She's a founder of Correlsense Consulting. Sorry, I butchered the name of the company, but she's got some blue chip clients, as you can see from this list. And today is currently the CEO of Oraplayer, leading provider of Oracle Forms, SO integration and mobile integration. And finally, is very active in the Oracle user group and development community. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over the presentation to Mia.
Thank you, Frank, for the introduction. I thought I'd start with a little bit of a poll to kind of figure out what technologies the listeners are running. Of course, there were some pretty big architecture changes between Forms Client Server to Forms 9i and 10g, which run on the Oracle Application Server, to Forms 11g, which runs on the WebLogic server. And of course, there's Oracle Applications, ERP, eBusiness Suite, whatever people call it, between the different versions. So I thought that it'd be interesting to kind of figure out what our users are running right now. So if everyone would just humor us and answer the poll, that would be great. And then after the poll, we'll start a little bit about the background and understanding a little bit about the Oracle Forms architecture. I feel like that's a really important place to start so that we'll be able to see why monitoring Oracle Forms has been such a big challenge for people who are managing the Oracle Forms-based applications. So basically, Oracle Forms architecture, currently I'm talking about the web-based architecture. The client-server architecture, of course, only ran on the client side. But nowadays, the client-server architecture has not been supported since 2006. So anybody who is actually running a client-server should probably get in contact with me to explain how to do migrations of Oracle Forms, but that's a different webinar in itself. Basically, the Forms web architecture runs on several tiers. We have the database server, which of course has the tables that are in the database, along with any type of PLSQL procedures, packages, stored procedures, DB links, sometimes even message queues, which are all being run from the Oracle Forms system. Then we have the application server layer, as I said, in the different versions, for version 9i and version 10G, the application server is the Oracle Forms application server, which is the IAS, it used to be called, Internet Application Server, and it's running using Apache and OC4J, which was the runtime environment for Oracle Forms at the time. And now with Forms 11G, it's all running on WebLogic server. And so although the architecture or the infrastructure has changed, it's basically the same Forms architecture itself, which is that on the application server is running something called the Forms Listener. Basically, its job is to manage the runtime processes. When a person connects to the Oracle Forms server, the Forms Listener creates a session. That session connects with the Forms runtime engine, which is called the Forms server, and that component basically runs the application logic as well as what's called the data management. When you do an execute query on the database, when you run a stored procedure on the database, all the results are then sent to the Form Listener, and the Forms Listener sends that result to the client. So all the application logic is running on that application server tier. None of the application logic, none of the connectivity to the database is actually done on the client side. What does reside on the client side, which is on the user's computer, is what's called the Forms client, which is a Java applet. Also between the versions, there were different versions of the Java applet. Initially, there was an Oracle JInitiator, which was an Oracle implementation of the applet. And now with newer versions, they use the JDK, the Java development, the Java runtime development of Sun, which is now Oracle. And it's more of a generic applet. As you could see, the architecture is quite complex. I mean, you have Java running on the client and the client's side to basically monitor the CPU of the client and what's going on the client side. You have the application server side, which is both the Forms Listener and the runtimes engine. Then you have the database tier, which is the database server, and it could be that there's more than one database in the play. There could be DB links, which databases connect to each other, and there could be other systems that the same form server calls to. So Oracle Forms has quite a complex architecture, and that's one of the challenges we'll discuss today. Next slide. If we could go to the next one, great. Basically, beyond just the amount of tiers that the Oracle Forms runs on, I wanted to show a little bit of what a typical topology, high level or for high availability, will look like at an average customer. I work at a pretty large credit card company, and the telemarketing system is actually developed in Oracle Forms, whereby they have 800 telephone analysts that are talking at any moment and working in the Oracle Forms. So in terms of the desktops, there could be 800 users connected at any time. Then the load balancer basically passes them to more than one application, HTTP server, which there's the Apache server. Then the Apache server connects them to a WebLogic server, which that we said was the application server tier. And again, there's more than one machine. Currently at the credit card company, they have 13 production servers where they're running the Oracle Forms system. And then, of course, they have Oracle Database, which there as well. They have 3 cluster databases along with DB links to another 6 systems. So beyond the fact that the Oracle Forms architecture has many tiers, it could be that for each tier there's many servers involved. And this is kind of part of the complexity of performing real end user monitoring. Next slide. So now that we understand a little bit about the architecture that we're trying to understand and we're trying to monitor, we're going to talk a little bit about the monitoring challenges. So the first challenge I'm sure you could all guess, which is, wow, how complex is this solution, right? So Oracle Forms, for all its complexity, is actually a little bit ingenious, okay? There's no other technology that people have been developing in for over 20 years. So basically, they found a kind of smart way to take a client-server application and run it over the internet. However, when you try to figure out what's going on in the system, that could be quite challenging, right? You need to find, if you want to perform real end-user monitoring, you need to be able to identify a single session from the client through the application, through the HTTP server, through the application server, through the database, and be able to track the activity of that client through those multiple tiers and multiple servers. So you get into these kind of systems, which used to happen to us all the time actually, where there would be a problem, there would be some sort of performance degradation, and they would say, okay, Forms is acting slow, and then basically 6 different people, right? The help desk would go and check out the client side. I would check the logs of the application server. The DBAs would be looking at the database monitoring consoles. The network people would be checking the network statistics. And you'd end up with this situation where all of us were trying to figure out what is the actual element that has the degrading performance because of this complexity of multi-tiers. So that's obviously the primary challenge when we want to perform end-user monitoring. Next slide. So another big challenge in general, not only in the Oracle Forms world, is your users do not speak to you in the normal language, right? How many times have you heard, the system is running slow? And you say, what is running slow? They say, the system. And you say, okay. The system could be, is it slow when the system does a startup? Is it slow when one form calls to another form? Is it slow when data is queried in the form? There could be 100 different things that are actually slow. And when you try to get more information from the user, it's like pulling teeth, right? They don't know exactly what you're talking about, and them actually describing the problems that they experience is quite a challenge, right? I can't tell you how many times I've received an email of just a gray screen from one of my customers, and they say, this is what we get in Forms. And I'm like, okay, it's not very helpful to try to understand your problem seeing a stock screen, and then when I try to understand what the actual activities were when they actually received that stuck screen, they think I'm talking to them in Chinese. About 100 times I've received emails, our system is not working, and you say, what's not working? Again, you get into these kind of loops where the users could hardly identify what they were doing in the system. If you're lucky, they could say, I was performing an order entry, and then you only have 100 elements on the form to try to figure out which one of them is causing the performance issue. We want to try to find, in a monitoring solution, something that we are not dependent on the users to actually describe and define the problem they're experiencing. We want to be able to know exactly the points, right, exactly the actions and the activities the users were performing when the problem occurred, and to see even historically, which elements have slower wait times or performance issues, and not have to rely on these kind of vague, these vague users describing the issues they're experiencing in the system. Next slide. Of course, another very fun issue is the issue of migrations and upgrades. As we did in our little poll, you saw that Oracle Forms has several versions, and a lot of times the form systems are very, very critical production systems, mission critical systems where you go in and the customer's like, do a migration but don't touch anything because it's it's working. People are so nervous to do these upgrades because they are afraid of finding, you know, degraded performance, bottlenecks, any type of problems in the newer versions. So another thing that basically we are looking for in a monitoring solution is a solution that is able to really do a diagnostic prior to migrations and upgrades, showing on, you know, either system test machines or on the new version that performance is not degraded, and also not even connected to migrations, being able to get to the root of a problem fast. Basically, one of the major problems with any forms application is, as I said, one of our form systems is telemarketing, and another one for a large cell phone company in Israel, their billing is based on Oracle Forms. When there's a problem, we have no time to find the root cause of that problem, and to be able to really start looking and, you know, scouring the log files of an application server to find exactly what the problem is, when the problem could also be in the database logs and what have you, is something that these companies can't afford. Like, this downtime could cost them, you know, millions of dollars, and you know, we're really trying more and more nowadays to have, you know, all eyes on the system to be able to really find these bottlenecks before they occur and get to the root of problems if they occur as quickly as possible. So next slide, please. So basically, if we're to sum it all up, form systems users have pretty unique needs in a monitoring solution. Beyond, you know, the complexities that we've described, is also a monitoring solution should be an infrastructure solution. Any monitoring solution that requires application changes or changes to the code of the system is a problem. If you look at some of the systems I'm working on, they could have thousands of forms. And if I start saying to my developers or my customers, okay, so now go into every one of your forms and put this type of code, we wouldn't be able to really get into that type of situation. We don't want to be trusting developers to put coding in order to do our monitoring for us. Secondly, we're not going to be able to really map every element on each form. Some forms have hundreds of elements. Just think something silly when you order from Amazon, you know, how many fields are on the actual form. And if you multiply that by hundreds, those are the form systems, right? You can just imagine a billing system, how many different items there are on the screen at any one time. So any solution that's going to require us to start mapping the form name and all the elements on the form, or do any type of manual coding, is just not going to be acceptable for us. The second issue that is would be one of our unique needs is the issue of real end-user monitoring, is to actually get the business context. A lot of times you have monitoring tools that show you kind of certain segments of the application server log, and then all of a sudden you're trying to figure out, and it's basically should be written in Chinese. Like, unless you have a very advanced understanding of the application server technology, you won't be able to really understand what's written there, right? We want them to talk English, right? We want them to say, Mia pushed button 9, and Mia pushed the save button, and then she waited 10 seconds, and then, but she should only be waiting 4 seconds, and then you have a common language with the end user, right? If you say to the end user, you are running form order entry, and when you clicked new order, it was slow, then all of a sudden you have a common dialogue with the end user. So if the monitoring data could be in the business language, for you to have a common language with the application developer as well as the end user, all of a sudden it's much easier to get to the root of the problems, right? And not only that, we want basically a real-time solution. Okay, a lot of monitoring tools rely on kind of robot or simulation technology. It's not the actual real end user experience. But then you get into these situations where, like I said, I have at one of my telecom companies where you have 15 servers. So if I have a robot running on server 9 and somebody on server 13 is complaining, I won't know which server has a problem. Okay, so we really need real-time, real end-user experience, and we need it on the production environment. Because we are talking about so many different servers and so many different layers, we really need some solution that is all-encompassing for the whole architecture and the whole topology. We want to be able to prevent problems before they occur and prior to users complaining. Okay, so one of the big problems is that, you know, I was working at a customer that we only knew when there was a problem when we would get like calls screaming from the end users that the telemarketing system is now being shut down because of a problem in Oracle Forms. That is way too late, in my opinion. Like, if you only know there's a problem from your end user, that is a serious, serious infrastructure problem. So we want to be able to get, you know, notifications and alerts of problems with some sort of threshold in time that we're able to resolve these problems before they actually cause major damage or shutdowns of the system. So we want to be able to like get alerted with time to like alert the system managers and a time to resolve the solution, just to resolve the problems and find solutions before it gets to the end user. And of course, monitoring solutions in general are really there to help us reduce the risk in our upgrade projects, to get kind of monitoring data and to be able to understand what's going on in our system without a performance penalty, right? If I add the current monitoring tools that are around and they perform forms trace, basically I have monitoring data, but I also have a system that barely runs. We don't want to end up with these types of situations where in order to get the monitoring data, I barely am able to run end users on the server. So, you know, the monitoring data should be really invisible practically to the end users and should work kind of silently and not infringe on the daily activities in the system. And of course, to do these type of analysis tests or stress tests before the actual new versions or new parts of the system are rolled out would be ideal. So then that way we could really understand what type of performance we will be getting from our solution and if there's going to be any performance changes due to version changes. I think that that's basically what forms users in general are looking for in a monitoring solution. And now I will hand the baton back to Frank Days, who will describe Correlsense, what Correlsense has to offer us troublesome forms users with their solution.
Great. Well, thank you, Mia. It's pretty informative stuff, and it does share a lot about the challenges that forms users face on a daily basis. And what I'd like to talk about now is the 5 keys to managing performance in Oracle Forms and e-business suite environments. And we'll talk specifically about 5 things that really people can do to improve these and kind of support some of the things that Mia was talking about. And the first thing is, you know, tracking all of your user requests, right? These systems are fairly complex. I think Mia's second architecture slide illustrated something that was more complex than the first one, but still wasn't nearly as complex as the systems that she probably sees out in the field, where there are tens, even sometimes hundreds of components out there, from the client to the application server to the database. These systems are very complex. And you users, people trying to manage these things, need a way to watch how your user requests are going through all the components and trying to understand how that transactions are going on an end-to-end basis across the entire stack, not just at any specific component in that. And that goes across all the different technologies that you may be running, whether it's Apache or Oracle or Forms runtime or an Oracle database. You need really the ability to watch these user requests so you can identify potential or existing problems. Whether it's the next thing is having the ability to understand the business context. I think Mia was talking about this, you know, really towards the end of her section, which is Having the transaction names, understand it at a detail level, not at a real technology level, so when you're trying to solve a problem, you have a much better idea of where the problem is coming from and what it means to people, and not something where you have to go and manually hard code everything in a long basis, but having a system that can adapt and understand and adjust to new versions as well as the current versions that you have. As we talked about a few moments ago, these systems are increasingly complex, things are changing. You also need a system that can adjust to what's going on. This architecture slide shows a really simple architecture. Anecdotally, we hear from the field from our customers of stories, we've been in prospective customer accounts where we've auto-detected networks and auto-detected application maps with all the components, and people have had a look of horror on their face when things like test systems and pre-production systems are actually being used in production environments. Having the ability to understand how your components interact and what components are integral is a really important way of monitoring, whether it's forms or really any application out there. Sometimes there are even differences between what the theoretical map of the application is and what servers are in production. With so many changes in components and systems and servers coming on and offline, having an auto-detected and the ability to see it in real time as it's happening is really important for forms or for really any other application. The next thing is, as new releases pop out there in increasingly agile environments, it's really important to have the analytics, have advanced analytics that run real time to be able to, once there's a problem, click down into the system and isolate it. If there's a bottleneck, if there's a slowdown, as Mia was explaining earlier, that people don't always have a great description other than they getting complaints. Your support desk or your app support team's trying to figure out the root cause of complaints from an important customer. Without advanced analytics, it's very difficult to isolate those problems down to the individual component or transaction and really optimize the problems that are causing the bottlenecks. In this example here is a picture of a component that Correlsense's SharePath product can do, which can provide insights into an application's performance before and after some time frame. So that could be before and after a release, right? That's oftentimes when a problem can occur. That we can see when someone changes something, we can look at before and after to see if it improved or even degraded the performance of your application. Important stuff when you're managing a new rollout of a new version or even just a .version update. Important stuff and stuff that's really people's jobs and livelihoods depend on. And finally, providing information to your stakeholders is important if you're in IT infrastructure or you're managing an application. There are people downstream and upstream, whether it's your CIO or it's an application owner or it's someone whose business relies on the performance of your forms application. Being able to provide insights into service levels is really crucial, and whether it's a dashboard on the screen or whether it's email reports that go out to people, you need to provide some insights into service levels so people can, ultimately you're going to be held accountable for the performance of a particular application, as are people who are relying on that particular forms application for their livelihood. So monitoring forms applications. There are technologies out there today, and you probably are familiar with some of them, and there are some real inherent challenges to those, and I think Mia touched on it a little bit, but some of the basic challenge that people face is that these applications are really point solutions, and they're not really, whether it's written for Java and .NET and being crammed into the Oracle environment, having a solution that really is designed to meet the unique needs of a forms runtime environment is really crucial. Having real end-user experience is important from the end-user client and how things are rendered on a client-side application all the way through, again, through the app server and to the database is really crucial to understand what's going on. A system that can, these other systems often don't auto-detect and don't, so they require a tremendous amount of manual mapping and setup, or even customizing your code, which isn't plausible really in a lot of environments. The overhead of some of these systems can be difficult and really impact performance, which is something that's not what you want in a system for monitoring. And having analytics that go down to the transaction so we can isolate very specific problems. We don't want to live in a world of averages. We want to live in a world of certainty if there's a problem. And looking into log files can be a challenge. So the solution that we're talking about, Correlsense, has a specific solution for Oracle Forms and eBusiness Suite. And again, as I talked about a few moments ago, having that specific Forms runtime coverage is a crucial thing. The Correlsense solution goes well beyond just Oracle Forms and provides coverage for rich clients as well as a really wide variety of enterprise technologies, going back to things like C++ and ESBs. The broadest coverage right out of the box without any custom configuration. Most enterprise and complex applications that run on Forms really have a lot, are really crucial, and you need a sophisticated product like Correlsense SharePath to handle the complex heterogeneous architectures that are common proliferated. A really crucial thing is that the dashboards in SharePath are really available for a variety of users, whether it's an application developer, someone in infrastructure and operations, application support, or even an application owner or business level people. There are dashboards that provide data about performance at varying levels of sophistication that make it easy for people, whether it's someone who has very limited knowledge of the application, and you can see down below like a bullseye, to provide them sense red bad, green is good, simple views so people can understand if there's a problem, to much more sophisticated views and querying for more enabled people. Mia was hitting on the point that application code changes are not something that people want to be doing, and SharePath really is excellent at not requiring, because it doesn't require people to make specific code level changes to monitor applications. And as I mentioned earlier, the ability to auto-detect transaction paths in your infrastructure is really crucial. So in summary, performance is important in today's IT landscape and infrastructure. And SharePath is a transaction management offering for Forms and Oracle eBusiness Suite solutions. With that, I'd like to open it up to questions to see what questions that people might have. I wanted to see. I see that Mia, you were answering some questions.
So I'm back too.
No, it's okay.
They're actually not monitoring questions.
Oh, they're not. That's okay. Well, it looks like we're right about against it in time. What I'd like to just go to the last slide and give people one last chance to see if they there are any questions. So one of the questions was, can SharePath instrument? I don't know if you answered this question. Can SharePath instrument and monitor PHP apps? And the answer is yes on that. Okay, so we had what version of Forms does SharePath solution work against? I don't know off the top of my head on that, Mia. Would you know the answer to that?
I do. Yeah, if I recall correctly, you support version 9i, 10g, and 11g. So basically,
Great.
everything web-based from 9i.
Excellent. Well, the last slide shows. I think if someone's really interested in taking a closer look at SharePath for Oracle Forms and for eBusiness Suite, the best way would be to get a live demo. And I'd say send an email to info@correlsense.com or email me, or actually my email address is incorrect on here. It's frankd@correlsense.com, or even email Mia with questions, and we'd be glad to set up a time with a separate WebEx with a custom demo and see if SharePath for Oracle Forms is right for you and can help solve any performance challenges you're facing. Let's see if there's any other questions that have come through here. Well, I guess on that note, we're kind of bumping up against it for time. On behalf of Mia and the folks at Oraplayer and me, Frank, and all of us here, and my producer, Tom McEwen, who hasn't been on the phone, who's been keeping us all connected today, thanks for joining us today. Once again, the recording of this will be posted on Correlsense.com, if not later today, tomorrow morning. Thanks for joining us, and please do email us if you have any questions. Thank you, and have a great day.